As you all know, we have never been just a campaign. We are a grassroots, multiracial, multi-generational movement which has always believed that real change never comes from the top on down, but always from the bottom on up. We have taken on the greed of the entire corporate elite. That struggle continues. While this campaign is coming to an end, our movement is not. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. As I hope all of you know, this race has never been about me. I ran for the presidency because I believed that as a president, I could accelerate and institutionalize the progressive changes that we are all building together. And if we keep organizing and fighting, I have no doubt but that is exactly what will happen. We often hear about the beauty of America, and this country is incredibly beautiful. But to me, the beauty I will remember most is in the faces of the people we have met from one corner of this nation to the other. The compassion, love, and decency I have seen in them makes me so hopeful for our future. It also makes me more determined than ever to work to create a nation that reflects those values and lifts up all of our people. Please stay in this fight with me. Let us go forward together. The struggle continues.
So tonight we are looking at two separate segments. And the first segment we're going to be talking about is running for national delegate. We will have Amber King. She's Secretary of Our Revolution Washington and Chair of Our Revolution King County and Secretary of Progressive Caucus and many other hats. Carin Chase is with us, and she is Washington State Campaign Director for Bernie 2020, and Joanne Fleming, Chair of Our Revolution Inland and 3rd LD State Committee member. Thank you guys for coming and talking about that. The next segment we're going to be talking about is becoming a PCO, and that'll be with Courtney Love. She is Vice Chair of Our Revolution Washington, Chair of Our Revolution Pierce County, and Board Member of Whole Washington, and of course many other hats as well. Justin Baird, he's Treasurer of the Progressive Caucus and a 2016 Sanders Delegate and Washington Whip. And then we also have Kate Moran. She is with Our Revolution Tri-Cities, and she is a Benton County State Committee member. Welcome, everybody, for tonight's town hall. Just to remind you all that we are a part of UpHill Media. Thank you, UpHill Media, for supporting us. And Roar Media, which is Oz in the background. Thank you, Oz, for making this possible tonight. And to help support our shows, you can find those links in the comments below. All right, so first we're going to be talking about running for national delegate. Let's go ahead and kick that off. Amber, do you want to introduce people, or is Carin just taking it from the get-go?
Hi, I'm happy to introduce everyone. My name is Amber King, and we're fortunate today to have Carin Chase, who is our amazing Washington State Director for Bernie 2020. And we have some slides to go with that. Oz, if you have a moment, we are on slide number 9. Just to give everybody a little bit of update of what we are looking at. Let me see if Carin's available. So we did do a fair amount here in Washington State, and I just want to make sure that everybody knows that we are continuing and we have a lot of work to do. So I hope Carin can give you some great tips, information in framing the fight for how we continue.
Oh, well, thank you, Amber. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone on our revolution. It has been my absolute distinct honor to have served as the Washington State Director for the Bernie 2020 campaign, and serving as your conduit to the national campaign. As you know, we did not, the results in Washington aren't what we really wanted, but that's all right. We, along with all of the Bernie victory captains and all the wonderful Our Revolution volunteers, hosted thousands upon thousands, tongue-tied today. Sorry, it must be the coronavirus pandemic stress getting to me. The thousands of phone calls and texting, the hundreds and hundreds of events that everyone held at their homes, at libraries, canvassing, just about everywhere you could think of. We hosted a Bernie Victory Captain event led towards the increasing the turnout that, we all had. Washington State had the highest voter turnout in the entire country, and you should all be very, very proud of that. And we also know that this was never about just one single campaign. As we know, campaigns have beginnings and endings, but movements last forever. And as Bernie, our leader, has said, he would like us to continue on in this fight, and continue to join us in the progressive agenda, which means we care about all those folks that are now on the front line, the grocery store checkers, the essential workers, our healthcare workers, the people picking up our garbage. They deserve the respect that has not been afforded them in the past, and Bernie is pushing for that right now. And that's not something that goes away after the presidential election. So when we talk about framing, we do also know that in Washington State, whole Washington is poised and ready to provide health care for all of us who are worried about our health care. Yes. That's not a fight that goes away after this presidential election. So the next stage in what we're doing right now is running for national delegate and local legislative district delegate. Now, I had the distinct honor to serve with Joanne Fleming on the Caucus Improvement Committee when we were selecting the delegate selection plan for the state of Washington. We did switch to a primary, all mail-in, and in retrospect, I'm really glad we did that. So just because we were being hit with coronavirus right now. But I really want to give a shout out to Joanne, because she has worked so hard to think about every single possible aspect of the delegate selection plan and how we move forward to make sure that it is a fair and open process. And so, Joanne, are you available right now? Because I want to make sure that people are recognizing the work that you have put into this, and that you really are the state expert on the delegate selection and affirmative action plan in Washington State.
Hi, Carin. Yeah, thanks. No pressure.
Well, no, it's real there. It's real, And as we're talking about the moving forward, I want to point out that one of the things we're talking about is PCOs. And I want to say I'm a proud PCO of my precinct. It's also running for office. I'm also a proud member of the Edmonds School District. And I also, as soon as my position here with the Bernie campaign ends next week, I'll be going back to the Washington State Democrats Executive Committee as the president of the Federation of Democratic Women. The positions I hold are continuing on the fight for social justice and to make sure that our students are not graduating with crushing debt, to make sure that we're all not terribly concerned about our health insurance and losing coverage, and any possible um, I, I guess what I'm saying is I'm so passionate about this and I'm just without words right now. That because that we must stay in this fight, we need a chance to process and grieve that we're not continuing on, but the movement lasts forever. And that's what our revolution is all about. And that's why I so respect everyone on this call right now. So without any further ado, I would like Joanne to talk a little bit about what's coming up and some of our deadlines, when the first one is going to be on, I believe, April 24th. Isn't that right, Joanne?
That is correct. Yeah, our first, what would have been legislative district caucuses, have been moved to an online process. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we are no longer able to have caucuses at the legislative district level or at the county level or at the congressional district level. We don't know if we're going to have a state convention in person. All of it is now going to be done online. So WAElectionCenter.com is where folks want to go if you would like to be a delegate to the state convention. And so that's the first step. This is where we really need people to step up who are strong Bernie supporters, because the folks that register to be legislative district delegates, again, it's WAElectionCenter.com. You go and you pick your legislative district. And if you're not sure what that is, you can look it up. There'll be links in the notes and things. You register and you run. And then what we do is we go make sure that our state platform is as progressive as Bernie's policies. We need as many people to fill those delegate spots as possible, because if we don't have folks in those spots, then the Biden folks get to make those decisions. And that's the last thing we want. So, like Carin said, there's been a lot of frustration, a lot of heartbreak. Just watching that video, I cry again, you know.
I know, Joanne, I did too. That's not what I was going to say.
You know, there's not been a day that I haven't cried several times a day, but that's what this is. We have to grieve. And, you know, this is not something we've been working for the last 9 months to a year. This has been a 5-month or 5-year journey for a lot of us with Bernie. But like Carin said, this is a movement, not a moment. And we need everybody to step to the plate and run to be delegate. Are you mad at the Democratic Party? Probably. A lot of us are. I'm state committee member for the 3rd Legislative District Democrats. I intend to run again to be female identifying state committee member for the 3rd Legislative Democrats, because guess what? They don't want us in their party. That's exactly where we need to be. And we need every one of you to step up and run to be delegate and to consider running to be a PCO and getting involved. It's frustrating. It's hard work. It's heartbreaking and soul crushing at times, but I will tell you this, we've won a lot more than we've lost, and we're not done. So WAElectionCenter.com, what you want to do is go there and you will register to be a legislative district delegate for Bernie Sanders. What that means is you'll have 2 primary responsibilities. The first one is voting at the congressional district level. So I live in Spokane, which is the 3rd Legislative District, the city of Spokane. I'm also in the 5th Congressional District. So the congressional district level is where we vote on the national delegates for Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. There are 4 total in my district, 2 for Bernie, 2 for Joe. So that's where we as legislative district delegates will vote for who represents Bernie at the national level. So it's really important that we have as many of you as possible run to be legislative district delegates, because we need as many Bernie people as possible to pick great national delegates that will stand strong for Bernie at the national convention. Whether it's in person or virtual, whatever happens, we need good, strong people. So let's see, are we taking questions now? Or are we taking questions at the end? I'm sorry, I probably should have asked that earlier.
Oh, just keep going. Yeah, we'll take questions.
Oh, there's a map. So as you can see, okay, so there's a 4 and a 6 right on Eastern Washington. The 3rd Legislative District is the city of Spokane. You can't really see it because it's the most densely populated area. It's kind of like King County, all those in Western Washington. There's tons of legislative districts in there. But you'll see there's the 4th, the 6th, the 7th, the 9th. Kate is in, I believe, the 8th. Is that correct? Probably, I think. Anyway, figure out where your legislative district is. If you're not sure, you can reach out to any of us. We can help you figure that out. Run to be a delegate. You will vote at the congressional district caucus online, most likely. And at the state convention, you will attend the state convention, whether it's virtual or in person, probably be virtual. And we will vote on our platform and a whole bunch of other awesome stuff to make sure that Bernie's values, his policies, the things that we care about are at the forefront for the Washington State Democrats platform. This is where we make our voices heard. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to the next person in line, which I believe is.
There actually was one question that you
okay.
may or may not be able to answer. Is where can they find the breakdown of the delegates in the LD level?
That is actually listed on when you go to register to be a legislative district delegate. It's at the very top of the page for your legislative district. So for example, for the 3rd legislative district, we have 14 delegates for Bernie Sanders and 10 for Joe Biden. My district is very strong Bernie Sanders supporters, very strong for Bernie Sanders. So we have 14 and 10.
What was that website again?
WAElectionCenter.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Your legislative district, and it'll tell you that.
Go ahead, Amber.
Yeah, I was thinking you might want to just talk about a little bit about why they would want to be a national delegate and what the current plan. We have a little bit of, or I can cover it also if you'd like. So we have the delegate. At the moment, Milwaukee has now been pushed to August 17th through 20th. Any Democrat who is registered as a voter can run to be a national delegate. And you will, at the convention, you will have an opportunity to vote for the presidential nominee and the national committee platform, which is really important. So it is an opportunity that we can make changes to move forward and move the platform in the direction that we want to see that these policies are enacted at a national level. So there is a lot of work still to be done. And it's really important that everybody knows how to do that. And it's really, really important that everybody stay involved and stay connected, especially in these trying times, and that there's more work to do than ever. I just want to make sure everybody really understands that. But I thought maybe Carin might want to jump back in and talk a little bit about our timeline, about what the timeline, and then I will talk a little bit more about digital organizing and how to run a digital campaign.
Can you explain first, and then Carin will go to you, how LD delegates are chosen, or is that going to be coming up?
Oh, I'm sorry. We talked about that. I apologize.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry.
Go for
Let
it,
me just
Joanne.
skip past
That's on slide 11.
This is one of the drawbacks to being so involved is you forget these things because they're just a given. So a precinct committee officer, which are elected officials, that's elected, and if you want to be one, you can sign up to run to be a precinct committee officer when that opens up in May. But precinct committee officers, both elected and appointed, will get to vote for the legislative district delegates. So if you're not sure who those are, your legislative district chair can help you with that information. I believe almost every legislative district has a website or at least a Facebook page with contact information. If you have trouble finding that, again, you can reach out to any of us. We can help you find that information. The PCOs are the ones that are going to vote for you. So just like running for any other office, you're going to want a campaign. I would recommend reaching out to every single PCO, regardless of whether or not you think they're a Bernie person or a Biden person. Reach out to them because they're going to be the ones who are going to choose the delegates. And you want to make your case for why you believe you will be a good delegate to the state convention. Did I miss anything? Is that?
Sounds like you got it.
Okay. Sorry about that.
I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about the timeline, since some of that has changed as well, about how to run and when to run, because there are several steps to that, and that'll lead into what I will talk about on how to run a virtual campaign to become a delegate.
The dates have not changed as far as the date we're voting and things. You have to sign up by April 24th to be eligible to be a delegate. So you have to go to waelectioncenter.com and sign up to be a delegate. And just so you folks know, not everybody has an internet connection or has trouble getting onto the internet. And I know those of us that live in cities and are privileged, that seems like something that most people wouldn't think about. But if you know someone who lives in a rural area that might have trouble, have them reach out to their legislative district chair or to their legislative district state committee members, and they can help them make sure that they can sign up to be a delegate without that being a barrier. Because I know it's always been a concern. So April 24th, a couple weeks from now, is the deadline to sign up on the website or through the chair, the state party or the legislative district chair if you need to go that route. After that time, I don't believe they will be accepting any additional delegate submissions. So April 24th is the first big date. And I'm going to let Amber talk through the how do I run for a delegate, because you were going to talk about that anyway, and that has all of the dates right there. I'll just let you go through that.
Peyton Staver has a quick question. He did find where the LDs are broken down, so thank you for that. Are LDs split between CDs still separate elections? Are you going to go through that here in a moment, or do you want to answer that right now?
Yeah, no, I can answer that. So the legislative district delegates that are voted on by the precinct committee officers. So the precinct committee officers vote for the legislative district delegates. The legislative district delegates have two responsibilities. The first one is to vote for the national delegates at the congressional district caucuses. Those are, I believe, on May 3rd. I believe. No, that's wrong. I can't see the slides, and I don't have that date in my head. The next
May 30th.
Thank you. The next responsibility would be to attend the state convention, which is in June. I believe it's the third weekend in June, and vote for all the things that are voted on at the state convention, the platform, all of those good things. Other than that, the legislative district delegates don't have any primary responsibilities. Those are big responsibilities. They're super important. The legislative district delegates will be choosing our national delegates. So again, if you are going to run to be a Bernie delegate and you see that you have 8 or 10 Bernie delegates in your legislative district, but only 4 or 5 people are running, reach out to your local Bernie friends and ask them to run. Because the last thing we want is either delegate slots that are empty or delegate slots that have been filled by somebody who's not a strong Bernie Sanders supporter. So together we need to make sure that every Bernie delegate slot is filled with strong Bernie Sanders supporters that will be able to vote at the congressional district caucus for the national delegates, as well as the state convention for the platform and all of the things that happen there. And I would be more specific in regards to the state convention, but because we don't know if it's going to happen in person, it's very difficult to know whether or not some of the things that we would typically take action on are going to happen. So more to come on that, but run to be a legislative district delegate, get all your friends to run, make sure they're good, strong Bernie Sanders supporters. And then if you want to run to be a national delegate, make sure that you sign up to do that as well. Oh, important thing I failed to mention. If you want to run to be a national delegate, and I think somebody else is probably going to mention this later, but I'll mention it now as well. You're going to need to fill out a letter of intent that is also on that same website. And that all the instructions for that are on the website as well. So there's an extra step for that. But first step is the one we really need to focus on right now, getting all of the Bernie delegate spots filled at the legislative district level with really strong Bernie Sanders supporters.
So Peyton in here said that his LD is split between 2 CDs, and I know that this isn't, only for him. So can you explain, like, if somebody's LD is split?
May I?
Complicated. As you say, Carin might be able to explain that, or anyone else that wants to jump in. Yeah, go right ahead, because we don't have those problems over here in Eastern Washington. Our populations aren't that dense.
This is Courtney. I was just at the Pierce County Dem meeting on Zoom on Thursday night, and it was discussed that all delegates at the LD level, no matter congressional district, will be voted on by all precinct committee officers, and that at the next level of caucusing is when people will divide into like political wings. Biden people will vote for Biden delegates, and Bernie people will vote for Bernie delegates. But right now, all PCOs will be voting for all LD delegates.
Yes, that's correct, because you're in your legislative district, but your congressional district, even if your legislative district is split between 2 congressional districts, you're going to be in the congressional district that you live in. So that would be the congressional district that you would run in. Does that make sense? So say that Spokane was split into CD5 and CD6, which it's not, so please don't say that I said that. But pretend that it is, and I live in 5 and Carin lives in 6. She would run in 6 and I would run in 5, even though the 3rd legislative district in Fantasyland encompasses both of those congressional districts. Does that make sense? Or did I just confuse everybody more?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, Carin and Amber.
So I think the basis of that question is that our presidential delegate allocation was determined by congressional district performance. And so, for instance, if I'll use my legislative district, the 32nd legislative district encompasses both the 7th congressional district and the 2nd congressional district. And our delegates are proportioned out. We have 39 delegates in the 32nd legislative district to elect. 10 of those come from CD2 and 29 of them come from CD7. I got to say, the 7th is one of the districts that Bernie did win. So we're really happy there. So the distribution of delegates are proportioned by congressional district. And I think that goes to the question of is the proportionment still there for the election and the eligibility. So, for instance, the PCOs will be voting on the entire slate. However, they will be choosing 10 of the delegates from the 2nd congressional congressional district and 29 of them from the 7th. Can you check if that answers Peyton's question? It's like this.
Peyton seems to be happy with the answers. Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's always a little bit confusing because we have legislative districts, then we have counties, then we have congressional districts, and some of the splits are pretty aggressive, shall we say. There's some legislative districts that have, I think, 4 counties and 3 congressional districts, and so they have in the last cycle they had a whole lot of caucuses that they had to attend. So the upshot is be sure you run for delegate. And if you want to check on how many allocated delegate positions are in each congressional district by LD, talk to your LD chair, because all the LD chairs now have all of the breakdowns, because we also have a male and female split that can differ by no more than 1. And we also have a gender non-binary section for when we're doing our balloting. So the best bet is to check with your legislative district chair to find out what the full split is between your congressional districts in your LD. Oh, thanks, Peyton. I can keep talking about this, but I think it's Amber's up to talk about a little bit about Running for delegate, I do want to mention that in addition to running for, when you're going to put your name forth for national delegate, there are two things that you should do. One, fill out the letter of intent and give it to the Democratic Party. And second, you should go to berniesanders.com /sign up /Bernie 2020 delegate and register with the campaign itself, your intent and interest to run. This will expedite the process just a little bit.
Yes, and I will be talking about that a little bit more in detail as well, because there are several things that you do need to have ready to run a digital campaign, which is a little different than we're used to being able to have caucuses in our neighborhoods with our like-minded people. So there's several different steps that you need to do for this. The first one is you have to upload a photograph. So I want everybody to be prepared. If you can take a nice natural light photograph with natural background lighting, just even if you have to go out in the yard with your cell phone, if it's a decent cell phone, or have somebody take it for you, the back facing camera is always going to be a better quality. And you also need to prepare a statement of why you want to be a delegate. Right now on the state webpage, that is 300 words or less. And we want you to be compelling. Tell your story. Tell why you're a strong person to represent this candidate. The next is you want to be able to list your affiliations and positions and volunteer efforts in support of your campaign. So you want to be able to add all your titles, anything you've done for volunteering, if you've been a Bernie Victory coach or a Bernie Victory captain, or maybe you just attended phone banks or you did other things. You want to be able to list those succinctly. And that's the basis of the online application through the state party. The next section is you print off, I know you can't see this, but or you kind of can. It is a letter. It is a candidacy statement, and we do have links to all of these. And so you just need to reaffirm that you are pledging your support to a candidate as per the national rules of the Washington State Delegate Selection Plan for the 2020 Democratic National Convention. This has to be received by May 4th at 5 p.m. at the state office. And so you just fill this form out, send it off to the state party, and you are good to go. And then the third section is to go to the Bernie website and register as a Bernie delegate. And that's really important to be able to connect you with the campaign. And there's several pieces of why you want to have that ready. So you want to be able to share across your social media profiles. You could be prepared to answer the questions from your district and beyond. And you also want to look at possibly even doing a virtual phone bank for your campaign. So if you know your neighbors' phone numbers, if you're a PCO, or if you're connected in your community anywhere, you can almost, for the most part, most people can assume the surrounding blocks around them are their neighbors that are in their same precinct. There is also, we know trying times, people may not have a printer. There is you can see a picture of this intent to stand for election at the state website. You could verbatim copy it and fill it out on your own if you're unable to print the document, and make sure that they have a copy of that as well. And so then for the mail your letter in and then get to the state campaign. Those are the two biggest pieces that you need to do. But there's things you can do in these times to promote. You can post it on your social media accounts, have conversations with people you know in your legislative district. Almost every LD I know has social media platforms, so you can engage and publicly declare that you're running as a delegate. Connect with volunteers that you've made. I know many of us run like a family, and we'd love to have you join that. And we'd love to make sure that we stay connected all the way through this process, and talking about platform and talking about the rest of the opportunities that will come from this availability to be a delegate. So I hope that you guys can encourage your neighbors, encourage people who don't look like you also to run. as a delegate, it's really important that we have diversity and inclusion in all of our communities and neighborhoods. And I'll be inviting Ms. Chase back to the platform to talk a little bit more about what that looks like in
Real
today's
quick,
world.
Beyond Steps asks, what is the letter called again and where can I get it?
There is a link to it in our rundown. It's the letter of intent to stand for election as a national convention delegate or alternate.
And then we will also have that information is in the rundown. So if you click the details in this YouTube feed, you'll get the link to these.
Correct. And at the end of your process of registering, it actually takes you right to that letter. So you can't go to the next step without seeing it.
Thank you. And then Amelia, just real quick before we move back to Carin, what if I wanted to run as an independent for Bernie? Can you answer that?
Well, Bernie did not run as an independent, so you have to be registered. By sending in this documentation, you're registering as a delegate under a state party. So there are only, unfortunately, 2 choices at this time.
Thank you very much. All right, Carin?
Hey, well, I think Amber covered that pretty well. Just to be clear, there are two types of delegate. One is to the state, and the other is to national. That was a good question about, what if I want to run as an independent? And this is a Democratic Party process that Bernie is participating in. And remember that we do not have party registration in Washington State. So you can participate in this Democratic Party process now. That doesn't mean you're committed to that for life, or that you're giving up any of your passions as an independent. But you can still run at the Democratic Party process as a delegate for Bernie. There will be somewhere, I think there is a note saying that you are participating as a Democrat for purposes of this delegate selection process. It's the same as having to check that Democrat primary box. And when we voted this last year and at the 2016 caucuses, where we had to check that we would be known as a Democrat for the purposes of the event that we were participating in.
Well, Amelia says she's got it. Thank you so much. And she's still all in for Bernie. So thank you, Amelia.
I think we're all still all in for Bernie. So I'm right there with you.
And then would you like to talk a little bit about the diversity and inclusion plan, Carin, since you were intimately involved
with it? With the delegate selection plan, we have in Washington State, it's called the Affirmative Action Delegate Selection and Affirmative Action Plan. And I do not have that in front of me, but I bet Joanne does. What the intent is to make sure that the delegation that we sent from Washington State actually does represent the multi-generational and multiracial coalition that supports Bernie. And we do know that there are many folks that have been historically marginalized and have not had as equal access to the process. And so we want to make sure that our delegation is comprised of people who may not necessarily have been participating in the past. For instance, we have, and I'm asked Joanne if you can pull up, if you have those affirmative action specifics, I just don't have them in front of me, but we do.
Yeah, give me a minute. I can pull them up. I don't have them memorized because it's a lot of numbers.
That's okay. But we look at
WA-Democrats.org. Yeah. It's in the delegate selection affirmative action plan, but give me a couple minutes and I'll have it for you.
The key point right here, though, is that we have goals of inclusion that we can consider as the basement. So when we're talking about wanting to have a number of the people in the LGBTQ community or folks of the Asian American Pacific Islander community participating and we have goals for participation, we look at those numbers as as the basement, and we want to be going towards the ceiling. And so I will be able to tell you what those specific goals are shortly. But the key is everybody on this call and who's listening right now, if they, number one, register to be a delegate, and number two, recruit someone who does not look like them, who has been historically underrepresented in a lot of our delegation and in the administration throughout Washington State. This is going to kind of wrap into why we need everyone to run for PCO, and we need to have a broader range of people participating and having access to positions of power, whether it be a staff position or an elected position. I know that's going a little bit astray from how we're doing our delegate selection in Washington State, but they are most definitely connected, because in this movement, it matters who is in a position of power and decision making. And the national delegates that we will be electing are going to be in a position of power to help take the Democratic Party platform in the way that Bernie has been leading us. And so I want everyone here to remember, sign up and then recruit someone who does not look like them to run for delegate.
I have those numbers if you'd like them.
Yeah, you just want to tell everybody really quickly so you have an understanding of what the affirmative action goals are for Washington State.
Yep, absolutely. So of our entire delegation, we need 9 African Americans, 16 Latinx, it's Hispanic in the DSAP, 5 Native American, 15 Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, 9 LGBTQ, and 12 people with disabilities. And then the largest number is youth, which is 30. And there's a sub goal of 7 for youth between 17 and 24. So we've got some pretty decent goals, and I think that we can meet them. So if you are one of those people, or if you know one of those people, please encourage them to vote, or sorry, to run to be a delegate. I personally fall into 2 of the categories. You would know by looking at me, but we've got some goals to meet, and those are the numbers. Again, you can find this information at wa-democrats.org, or if you can't find it, reach out to any of us and I can send you a screenshot.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Joanne.
Thank you so much, Joanne and Carin. So are there any other questions that anybody sees out there for us? Oh, actually, I see one. Lael White is wondering what defines youth. So let me see if I can find that within the document. It is a very
I
long
can tell you.
document.
Sorry, I was on a mute. I have another question after this one for you.
Youth is basically young Democrats, anybody under 35. And then again, there is an additional goal of 7 people between the ages of 17 and 24.
I also think it's a state of mind.
Well, I would agree with that. Anybody who knows me would agree with that as well.
So if somebody is temporarily out of state, is that a problem? This is from Bia Garth. Bia?
No. I mean, if you're registered to vote in Washington State, then you can run.
Because remember, a lot of folks are trapped out of state right now with the inability to travel and to shelter in place. And so I do know there's a lot of folks that are not in Washington State, but they can still participate, of course, as Joanne said.
Excellent. No more questions. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I am going to pass the torch off to Courtney, who will be talking about becoming a PCO and why that matters now that we know that they get to vote on everything, which is awesome.
Actually, one quick question. I wasn't realize it was at the very end of that one. So yeah, let's do a last call for any questions out there running for a national delegate or even state delegate before we pass the reins over. Sorry about that, Courtney. You're getting right ready to speak there, and I jumped right on in. Okay, so just another clarification. So for Amelia, what is the difference between state delegate and national? How are they different? Plain and simple, boom. Who wants to take that? Carin?
Sure. The state delegates are have the state delegates participate in two meetings. One at the congressional district to elect the national delegates, and two at the June Washington State Democrats convention to help craft the direction of the platform and any resolutions and to do some mingling and coordinating with people of like mind. So that is what the state does. The national delegates travel to Milwaukee and participate in the the Democratic National Convention to elect and choose the presidential nominee, which is going to be Biden at this point. So there are two distinct delegates pathways. You can do one or you can do both. Right, you are not, but remember, if you run for legislative district, you do not have to run for national. We do, but if you can also not run for state and just only run for national. So you can do one or the other or both. That answer your question? Thus far, we do know that the congressional district delegate selection will be done online. We do not know what's going to happen to the meeting in June or the meeting in July, which was supposed to be in Milwaukee. Thus far, it's been, I'm sorry, not July, August. I'm sorry, it was changed for a month out. It was moved from July to August. Sorry about that. I know everybody's shaking their heads at me. It's like, no, Carin, it was moved. But we still don't know what's going to happen, right? So if you're going to be running for national delegate, be prepared to travel to Milwaukee. And there's a lot of support for getting the funding together for that. And we can talk about that a little bit later. I believe Amber was going to say something about that, or I'm not sure who was going to be talking about that one, but there is a large support system set up for people to participate in the process so that finances are not a burden. The Washington State delegation that's going to be going to the national convention will be housed in Chicago. So there are a number of things that you want to keep in mind if you're going to be running for national delegate, is that you'd be staying in Chicago and the buses will be taking you to the convention in Milwaukee and back. So there are a lot of logistical things that we can talk about in depth.
Thank you. There's another question. It actually came from Facebook, Catherine Lewandowski. So what if I am currently an elected official of the Green Party, but she would like to run to be a delegate? How does that work?
Well, we don't have party registration in Washington. You have to be known as a Democrat to participate in this process. So you'll be pledging to be known as a Democrat to participate in the Democratic National Convention.
And basically, from our side, we don't care. There might be restrictions from the Green Party side. I don't know why there would be, but there could be. But you basically just have to say that you're a Democrat for this limited, tiny amount of time. And I get it's hard. I get it. I'm a state committee member for the Democratic Party, and it's hard for me sometimes to say that because I'm full on Bernie, and I know that everybody on this live stream is probably full on Bernie. So it's not labeling you. It's not branding you with a big D on your forehead for the rest of your life. It's simply showing up to support Bernie Sanders for those 3, 4, 5 days in Milwaukee.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody. I think we got the majority of these questions out for this part. You can always ask them again later on, and we can get back to it, but it is time to switch. are subject to PCOs, precinct committee officers. You've heard them mentioned when we're talking about national delegates. So next is Courtney, and Courtney's going to introduce everybody else in this segment. Take it away, Courtney. Thank you to Amber, Carin, and Joanne for heading up that section above.
Yes, thank you. I am very excited to be discussing precinct committee officers with Justin Baird and Kate Moran, and I will let them introduce themselves here in a moment. I would like to lead with that precinct committee officers are elected officials, and oftentimes those slots go unfilled. So keep that in mind while you're listening to us. Justin, thank you for coming. Would you give us a little something about yourself, your titles, your glorious participatory awards?
Other than being on time to bowling league years ago? Absolutely. Well, I was super involved in issues for years, and I didn't want to have anything to do with party politics. But I finally got to the point after issues of getting involved with district elections in Phoenix, making sure that we made sure that marginalized communities were able to get somebody representing them at the city level, working on the recall of only the sixth governor in national history to be recalled, basically Arizona's sort of rehearsal for dealing with a Trump. That governor only lasted 13 months. And again, then I got involved with ACT UP. It wasn't until I got to Washington and I was in this sort of like, I'm not going to get involved. To be honest with you, it was Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was the one that said, you've got to get involved in the system if you want to change it. So there are many ways to do that. But because Bernie was running as a Democrat, I then became a precinct committee officer. And I can tell you that while somebody might see that as you're either one or the other, to me, it's like having 4 different cars I drive until I get the one built I want to have. So right now, that's the car getting me to change the Democratic Party while I'm still involved in other party organizations. So we're talking about the Democratic PCO because in this state, you are allowed to have precinct committee officers if your party is considered major, and you're a major party if you achieve 5% in a previous general election. So we right now have that position as Democrats to be able to influence a party. So,
well, tell us first, what positions do you hold?
Well, I am presently the treasurer of the Washington State Progressive Caucus, which is a constituent caucus of the Washington State Democrats, and we support getting progressive candidates elected to statewide office, and also we also promote congressional candidates as well. We at the same time we're also trying to develop a more progressive base that gets involved in the process. I'm also the secretary of the Economic Justice Caucus. I am the communications director of the Environment and Climate Caucus. And goodness gracious, I think there's a whole bunch of other things I do as well. So.
All right. Well, thank you. And I just want to hear a little bit about Kate from Kate now, and then we'll get into the questions of the awesomeness of precinct committee officers.
Sure. Thank you so much, Courtney. My name is Kate Moran, and I was in the Navy up until 2015. So I really didn't do anything with politics until really after I was in the military. So when I moved up to Washington State from being in the Navy, I was able to participate in the precinct elections in 2016, and that got me involved into the democratic process. They told us about the democratic meetings that were going on in the Tri-Cities, and I said, you know, I'll go to that. I didn't realize there were Democrats in this area in Tri-Cities. So I went, and when I was there, they said that they were looking for somebody to be their secretary, and I didn't know any better. So I said, sure, I'll do it if nobody else wants to. And from there, I got to be more involved both in the 8th Legislative District Democrats and also in the Benton Democrats. I am now one of the Benton County State Committee members. I am also a precinct committee officer for my precinct. And because of Bernie running and telling us to run back in 2016, I ran for city council in my city. I did not make it the first time, but I came very close. But I did make it the second time, so I'm now also one of the West Richland one of the West Richland City Council members.
Oh my, I don't know if that's inspiring or fearful to consider running as a PCO might land you on the city council.
I go for inspiring.
It's all up to whatever people want to run for, and that's the biggest thing is I want people to run for something, please.
Indeed, indeed. Well, thank you both for being here. I was going to lead with asking Justin. Well, first I want to give a little bit of information about precincts. Precinct committee officers are elected officials that engage with the party. And a precinct is the smallest electoral district that we have. It's between 400 and 1,500 people. And then, so Justin, can you tell us what the legal obligations of a precinct committee officer is?
Well, the baseline thing for a precinct committee officer, depending on what the rules are in that particular county, you are there to make the recommendation for who would replace a legislator. Now, these rules will change county by county, but generally that's what a precinct committee officer is under the law obligated to do. The rest of your responsibilities are what's cultural within the Democratic Party. So what you are able to do, and this is where I look at it, it's not what you're required to do, it's what you're able to do. When you are a precinct committee officer, you then are the voice that chooses who leads that particular either legislative district and the county, and you get to choose who's going to represent you on the state committee from your LD and your county. So you have a voice in choosing 4 individuals in your 2 constituencies that then become the Washington State Central Committee. They're the ones who then also choose who runs this party and also every couple of years elect the DNC. So when you come in as a PCO, you're adding voice to change the party in the state and allow that change to go on to the national party.
Okay, thank you. And then, Kate, did you have anything to add to that? I just want to check in.
No,
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we know that the precinct committee officers are involved in the county and the legislative district parties.
Yes, thank you for clearing that up. And then, can you describe a little bit difference between elected precinct committee officers and appointed?
So,
Sure.
Oh, sorry, Kate. And then Justin can add on if he needs to.
Sure. So elected precinct committee officers are the folks that register, they file to be elected in I believe it's the May of every 4 years. And if you get elected, or if you're the only person that runs in your precinct, then you are automatically the precinct committee officer for your precinct. So if nobody files to be the precinct committee officer for your precinct, then somebody could be appointed. So we have the appointed folks that they still have to live within that precinct. There's a third one that we don't talk about much, and those are, they used to be called acting precinct committee officers, and I believe there's a different term for them now.
Precinct
coordinator. Yes.
And I do want to say that it's every 2 years in the even years.
Yes. Thank you very much. That actually sounds right, because I missed being able to file in 2016 because I was moving from one precinct to another, and I couldn't I couldn't file in the precinct that I was going to be living in because I didn't have an address at that point. So yes, it's every 2 years. And yeah, that's the biggest difference between elected.
The precinct coordinator. So that's someone who lives within the LD but not the precinct and is appointed?
Yes, that is correct. It's a person that's appointed just like the appointed precinct committee officer, but they do not live within that precinct. They do live within that same legislative district as that precinct, though.
Excellent. It's like an adoptive precinct program.
Yes.
If yours is filled, find someone else's. Thank you. Justin, was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, you carried that very well.
Excellent. And then, so we were talking about legal responsibilities. So that's filling legislative vacancies. And then there's official party administrative capacities. So, and then as Kate mentioned, both in the county and the legislative party organizations. So, what leadership roles might be restricted to uh, precinct committee officers, and then maybe a follow up to Kate, or I'm asking Justin this, right? I've already lost track. I'm a hot mess. Who did I address this question to? Was it
Well,
Kate?
when you become a precinct committee officer, you're actually a PCO for your county and also for your LD at the same time.
Yes.
So you'll go to a meeting every 2 years where you get to elect all of the leadership of both organizations. Now at the county level, there's what they call, you are part of the central committee, and then you'll vote for the executive committee, which is the leadership, the chair, the vice chairs, and the 2 state committee members. You also get to vote on the bylaws that govern the activities and the beliefs and how things operate. And it's also how you believe we as a party should behave. The same thing with the legislative district, you're going to vote for that leadership. So you can, even though you're a PCO, then also stand for those positions, but you don't have to be able to run for those. Was there another question there I missed?
No, I think that covered a good portion of it. And then, Kate, you had mentioned in a previous conversation, I believe, that state committee members are also voted upon by precinct committee officers. And what impact do state committee members have, and why are they so important?
Yes. So, with the precinct committee officers getting to vote for the state committee members, it is very important, at least for us, of course, for those precinct committee officers to be more progressive, because more progressive precinct committee officers will vote for more progressive state committee members. If we have more progressive state committee members, that means that when we vote to reorganize the state parties, then those more progressive state committee members can vote for more progressive state executive boards like the chair, the vice chair, treasurer, secretary. And also, what we did earlier this year is we voted on our DNC representatives from our state. So, the more progressive state committee members we get, the more progressive state party we get, and the more progressive DNC members representing our state we get. And if we get all of those progressive folks lining up, we can filter all the way up to make sure that we have a more progressive DNC. And that's where our power is as PCOs. We can make sure that we get the most progressive people we can, filtering all the way up to the highest levels within the Democratic Party.
Excellent.
That's
Thank you.
beautiful. There's a question, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
So from Sandia Slabbies, I'm sorry. So appointed PCOs cannot vote for some of the things ever, and can vote for some other ones. Anyway, she wants to clarify that appointments of PCOs don't necessarily have the full voting block as elected PCOs, correct?
I could
Perfect.
speak
That
to
was my next question. Justin, please take it.
So that depends on the bylaws in your individual county or your legislative district. And that's why it's so important to become a PCO, because you are the ones who actually affect those bylaws. In some places, they let not only the elected and the appointed and even the acting PCOs and everybody who joins as a member vote on everything. And other places, it's very restricted. They'll only have certain things voted on by the elected and appointeds and not the acting. So it's important when you do decide to get involved, even if you go in just to kind of do things once in a while, that you look on their website, look at their bylaws, and I bet you're going to find other progressive PCOs in your region who are interested in helping you get changes to those bylaws to make them more inclusive.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So, excellent. And then now I was in a an LD, legislative district, recently for many years, where precinct committee officers were the only people allowed to vote. There was no paid membership options, and I think appointed and elected PCOs. But now I've moved to a new legislative district, and now there are certain things that members can also vote on. Some of us call it pay to play, get to vote but not do the work of the precinct committee officer. And but even in that LD, it's there's kind of specifics. There are things that only precinct committee officers can vote on that vote paid members cannot. So endorsements are a precinct committee officer's influence as well, correct?
I'm sorry, repeat that again.
Endorsements.
So let's cover the one part again. You were talking about. You were saying the different things they can vote for. Keep in mind that even though it looks like pay to play, and that's exactly what it looks like when you look at those LDs. The state party does make it a point to say that we should never have that payment to be a hindrance. And so there's almost always a way for you to join them as a member on either a reduced scale, and in some cases without any payment at all. You just have to walk up and say, I want to get involved. I'm ready to do some things, but I can't afford it. Now, your next question had to do with legislative, was it replacement of legislative member?
Oh, no, it was endorsements.
Okay, endorsements. Now this is vital because candidates are going to want to come to a county Democratic organization or a legislative district organization, and it's only based on the bylaws of that organization. Sometimes it's everybody, PCOs and members, and other places it's just the elected and appointed PCOs, where you're going to have a voice in deciding who gets to have under their tagline that we are endorsed by this particular county organization or this legislative district organization. And this is when it's really important for you to be able to get yourself and other people that are progressive to run, so you can make sure that people that represent our values are the ones getting that endorsement, so that you're not sitting in a place watching all of these people who don't represent our values constantly getting those endorsements. So not only should you be running, but you need to get everybody that thinks like you to also run for these positions, so that we can make sure that we move these endorsements to more progressive candidates.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely.
Hey, Courtney,
Yes.
there is a section that I missed in talking about what PCOs are able to do, what their responsibilities are. And I think that Justin can probably answer it better than I, but it's when you have a legislative district, a state senator, or a state representative that is from your legislative district, the PCOs have some part in selecting who the replacement might be if it's not during an election year. Justin, can you explain that better?
Yeah, I touched on that too briefly, I think. Now, the way this interacts depends on what county you're in, but generally what we're going to do is, let's say your sitting state representative or state senator leaves office, resigns to go somewhere else, or leaves office in some reason and is vacant, and it has to do with how many months into that term it is. The county council is going to be making that decision on who they're going to submit, but they take the recommendation from the PCOs. Now, they don't have to, when you vote as a PCO, generally they're going to take the top 3 vote getters, and the council doesn't have to take the top vote, but generally by culture they will. But they have been known to take maybe the second, because that's a person who represents a marginalized community or somebody with more experience that they thought the PCOs overlooked. The important part is that they have to choose generally between the top 3. And I think Carin can correct me if this looks different anywhere else. But I participated in several of those, and it's quite an interesting thing, because all of a sudden somebody running for office is paying a whole lot of attention to precinct committee officers, because they are really trying to make sure, because once they can get appointed that position, it's generally easier for them to stay in it.
Excellent. Thank you. One of the things in current system is that we have precinct committee officers and no committees. So once you're a precinct committee officer, I do suggest you build up your precinct committee with people who are interested in not just engaging in representative government, but also gardening in your neighborhood, emergency preparedness, and some mutual aid. So build up the community you need in your precinct, and having this voter database is a great way to start, which is one of the perks of being a precinct committee officer. I also, oh, my notes escape me here.
Well, I can tell you, I want to tell you, I think that's a wonderful thing for you to point out, because a lot of people look at the fact that it's called a precinct committee officer and you're wondering, well, where's the committee? Well, the whole point of it, a lot of the reason why sometimes people are afraid to run is because they don't necessarily want to do all this legwork, but that's exactly what we want people to do. It doesn't necessarily mean every single moment you're in your neighborhood, you're talking about the Democratic Party and the ballot. You're helping improve, as you've said many, many times, Courtney, you're helping improve the neighborhood. You're getting people involved in the food bank and in housing issues. So thank you for pointing that out.
No problem. Now, there's the list of, so the legal obligation is to fill legislative vacancies. Then some of the party obligations are electing leadership and state committee members. But then there are asks that they ask you to do. They want the party would like you to door knock your entire precinct through over the course of a year. I think it's once a year you tap on at each neighbor's door. You're checking. The party focuses mainly on electoral stuff. This is where I think we can expand into the broader community building, networking. So it overlaps. I'm not asking you to do extra, the party asks for it too. But if you cannot do the door knocking, if you're not motivated to cultivate these relationships, how many meetings on average a year are there that precinct committee officers would expect to be asked to vote at?
Well, there are, was that for me?
Sure, yes. Unless Kate wants to leg wrestle you for it.
Well, there are 10 or 11, depending on the LD for the legislative district, and there's usually one monthly or for the county. Now, how many you're going to go to depends on how much you want to influence this party and make sure that the people you want to have endorsed, the resolutions you want put out there. So for me, you got to get in that room to make sure that you don't find out later that everybody did something completely contrary. The other thing is, of course, to make sure that if you've got other progressive PCOs that you're aware of, that even if they're not coming very often, what you're doing is you're contacting them to come and join you every time something very pivotal comes up. So you could go to as few as you really want, but if you really want an impact and change a community, I'd say go and make sure you know what's going on in that room.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, I prioritize my LD legislative district meeting and my county meeting for the party each month. And then I have other groups that I prioritize as well. But those two are always on my list. And when you get a call, usually an email call to a meeting, they send the agenda so you can go prepared and ready to counter or amend or suggest your own resolutions or amendments or endorsements. So there are some rules that each group follows, and learn your Robert's Rules of Order. It's very helpful.
Definitely. And Courtney, one thing that I would really like to mention is that there are two things that come to mind when I think about this. One is, for me personally, I like to be in the room where it happens. And if you're not a PCO, it's going to be hard to be that person. Also, if you are not at the table, you are on the menu. And when you become a PCO, you are more likely to have an effect on the party than you are just watching from the sidelines.
Absolutely. And I will say, a friend of mine was at a public event objecting to a fossil fuel expansion in Southwest Washington, and she overheard someone saying, elected officials sit in the front. So she tapped on the woman's shoulder and said, I'm an elected official. And she goes, who are you? And she goes, well, I'm a precinct committee officer in the 29th Legislative District. And they said, well, I've never heard of you. And they said, that doesn't matter. I'm elected. And she got to sit in front, and she got extra speaking time. It was great. So flex your muscles is what we're saying. Flex. All right, Justin, Kate, anything else you'd like to throw on at the end here? Any questions from the gallery?
Actually, yeah, there's a question or two, from the gallery. So, can you talk about when filing week is? And that is from Joanna Baxter. And then Sandia is throwing in on that too. It's important to mention that there's no filing fee. So, yeah, talk about the filing fees and when you actually can file to become a PCO.
Well, filing week is May 11th through May 15th. And filing fees are based on the salary you'd earn. And since there's no salary, there's no filing fee at all. Generally, in almost every county I know of, it's something you can do online. But I would check with your local county. There's 39 counties.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you so much. That's how I understand it as well. And also, precinct committee officers, since there's no filing fee, and it automatically gets you an active role in the party, you don't have to pay a membership fee to the party either. It's your free access to social influence.
And also, one thing I would mention, which I do believe I mentioned before, but just in case it kind of slipped by, if only one person files for that particular precinct, that person doesn't even get put on the ballot. They are automatically a precinct committee officer for that precinct. If more than one person files for precinct committee officer, and that also is for the Democratic Party, because there are precinct committee officers for the other party too, but when there is more than one person filing for precinct committee officer for the Democratic Party for your precinct, then you will be on the ballot only for those folks that are within your precinct come that August?
In August, yeah.
August, yes.
So what's interesting then is if you don't see yourself in the August primary, that means you won by default. But if there's anybody else running, then you'll both be on there. And then if you then either win by default or win in an election, your office begins on December 1st of that year, and it goes for 2 years until November 30th. So almost immediately after becoming a PCO, you're going to get told, great, come to the county, we're going to elect new leadership. And then shortly after that is come to the legislative district. So you start the ball rolling.
Yes. And not only that, but you get a really fancy certificate too.
I did not get a certificate.
Oh no.
And also in Tacoma Pierce County, our auditor, our election center will send you an email letting you know whether or not there's anybody else in your race. So you don't, in Pierce County, you don't have to wait until the ballot to come out to know if someone's running against you.
I think they're too busy in King County because not only do they not tell you if you're facing anybody, but they don't send you even a pin. So see, there's some advantages in Eastern Washington, Kate.
Yeah.
There's always advantages to being in Eastern Washington.
I love the undulating hills, the Palouse. All right. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here. Rhonda, would you like to take it from me?
Yeah. So one last check-in with, since we have Carin, with us, and she's been doing so much, or is she still with us?
I am still with you.
Yay. Let's get some of your thoughts about kind of tonight. Anything you want to add to what was mentioned?
I just want to say that as a chair of the 32nd District Democrats for 10 years, PCO's recruitment was one of the key activities. And the PCO position is the foundation of our democracy. And so I'm so thrilled that you are all talking about PCOs and their duties right now. So excellent job to Kate, Courtney, Justin. Thank you so much. I think you've covered everything really well. And I want to remind folks that it's in August that the Democratic National Convention is.
Thank you for the compliment and the reminder.
Oh, August. Oh, so much in August.
So it's a legislative district in April, end of April. And then the congressional district caucus in May, and then June would be the state one, which isn't officially electronic yet. And then August would be the national, which is hypothetically in Milwaukee.
Yes.
I'm not counting on anything in person for the rest of this year. So
I
it's
know.
hard for me to hypothesize in person.
I think this is a test of our resiliency. And I got to tell you, we are nothing if not resilient in Washington State, particularly in the progressive movement. We can do this together.
Yeah, when you're used to blue tent camping or blue tarp camping, it's really hard to be, too upset about this.
Well, thank you very much. Anything from anybody else on the panel? Amber?
Well, I just want to say that those of us, and you guys are among them, who've been these crazy radicals who've been fighting inside the party, we need all of you to come join us. We need you to come and help us fight the fight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was just going to say
Go ahead.
thank you to everybody for coming on, and that there's a lot of ways that we can stay connected with us and meet with us and help do this work and get your neighbors involved and talk to your family. Reach out to somebody else you know in a different part of the state too. Make sure they've signed up to be delegate. I know I've submitted my paperwork to be a delegate. And there's just many ways you can get involved and stay really busy with us.
Yeah. So thank you, Amber. Some ways to stay connected. Monday through Friday, we are actually meeting at 11 a.m. We're calling it Community Organizing and Training Meetup. All the ways to join are in the description below. Then on Sunday evenings, we have a weekly meeting at 7:30 p.m. Again, the link is below. And then once a month, we are going to be doing our Washington Revolution statewide call. So you're going to see us pushing that out quite a bit here coming up. Ways to make a difference. Phone bank. So every Thursday evening from 6 to 8, and there'll be a meeting beforehand and a meeting after. It is all about coming together as a group, talking through things before we get on the phones, go on the phones, and then come back together and debrief. So you don't want to miss those. And we will be calling ourselves in Washington State and being able to build together a bit better. And then you want to, of course, stay informed. So thank you again for joining us tonight on this town hall on becoming a national delegate and precinct committee officer. Next Saturday, we're going to be talking about the Incorruptibles, doing some campaign training, running for other offices. And then the Saturday following that is the Anti-Corruption and Election Reform Town Hall. So don't miss out. Absolutely stay connected, stay informed, and make a difference. And thank you again for joining us. To keep our lights on, there's links in the rundown on how to contribute. And we're going to go ahead and give it away to Oz. Thank you, Oz, for producing this fabulous show. We're going to go out with some music, and we'll see you again next week. Goodbye, everybody.